My sister Victoria's voice cut through the elegant dining room like a knife. Go find another table. This one's for family, not adopted girls. The laughter that followed. God, I'll never forget that sound. My parents, my brother Marcus, Victoria's husband, all of them, laughing like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I stood there, clutch in hand, face burning as strangers turned to stare at the spectacle. My name is Emma. I'm 27 years old. And for 22 years, I'd been living with people who called themselves my family. The chandeliers at Belmont's restaurant sparkled above us, casting this warm, golden glow over white tablecloths and crystal glasses. Everything looked perfect. Everything except me, apparently, because I didn't belong. I never had. I was 5 when they adopted me. 5 years old when Patricia and David Sullivan brought me into their home. I thought I was lucky. I thought I'd been rescued. But what I didn't know then, what took me 22 years to understand, was that I hadn't been rescued at all. I'd been purchased. Victoria, that's enough, I said quietly, trying to hold on to whatever dignity I had left. Oh, don't be so sensitive, my mother Patricia chimed in, waving her perfectly manicured hand like she was swatting away an annoying fly. We're just teasing. You know how Victoria is. Oh, I knew exactly how Victoria was. At 32, she'd mastered the art of cruelty disguised as humor. Growing up, she got the princess bedroom with the balcony. I got the converted storage room in the basement. She got designer clothes. I got hand-me-downs from charity bins. She went to an elite private university. I took out loans for community college. She got praised for showing up. I got criticized for excelling. Sit down, Emma, my father David ordered, his voice sharp. You're making a scene, I sat. Because that's what I always did. I swallowed my protests, my pain, my anger. I sat down and made myself small because that's what they'd trained me to do for 22 years. This dinner was supposed to celebrate Victoria's latest business deal. Some real estate investment my parents had financed. They were always financing Victoria's dreams, always opening their wallets for their biological children. 3 years ago, I'd asked for a small loan to start my graphic design business. Just $5,000. They'd laughed in my face and told me to be realistic, so I'd built it myself. From nothing. And now, 3 years later, I just landed a client worth $50,000. A major breakthrough. Something I was actually proud of. But tonight wasn't about me. Tonight was never about me. The evening crawled by with conversation flowing around me like I was invisible. Victoria bragged about her new Mercedes. Marcus discussed his promotion at the investment firm. My parents beamed, asking questions, offering congratulations when I finally gathered the courage to mention my new client, my $50,000 contract. My mother cut me off mid-sentence. That's nice, dear. Marcus, tell us more about your bonus. Nice. That's the word she used. Nice. Like I'd mentioned the weather. By the time dessert arrived, I'd retreated into myself. That familiar numbness settling over me like a cold blanket. This was my role. The outsider, the charity case, the one they kept around to feel good about themselves. Then the waiter approached with the leather check folder, and he placed it directly in front of me. I stared at it, confused. My heart starting to pound. What's this? Victoria's laugh was sharp, cruel, delighted. Oh, didn't we mention? You're paying tonight. Consider it your contribution to the family. Since you're always taking and never giving, the word came out strangled. Taking? The roof over your head growing up? Patricia ticked off on her fingers. The food, the clothes, the education. We gave you everything, Emma. The least you can do is buy us dinner. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. $3,270. I couldn't breathe. They'd ordered the most expensive wines on the menu. Multiple appetizers, premium steaks, lobster tails. Marcus had ordered 3 desserts just because he could. I can't afford this, I whispered. Of course you can, Victoria said sweetly, poison dripping from every word. You just told us about your big client. $50,000, wasn't it? This is nothing to you now. But it was everything. That $50,000 was spread over 6 months of work. Most of it was already allocated to business expenses, rent, equipment, and the crushing student loans my family had refused to help with. This single dinner would wipe out my savings account. But I couldn't make another scene. Couldn't give them more ammunition to call me ungrateful, difficult, dramatic. With shaking hands, I pulled out my credit card and placed it in the folder. The waiter whisked it away, and I forced myself to smile, to sip my water, to pretend this wasn't destroying me from the inside out. Victoria was already talking about her upcoming vacation to Tuscany. My parents were planning to join her. Nobody asked if I wanted to come. They never did. When the waiter returned with my card and receipt, I signed with numb fingers. $3,270 for the privilege of being humiliated by people who were supposed to love me. Well, that was lovely, Patricia said, dabbing her lips with her napkin. Same time next month? Next month. They expected this to become a regular thing. I opened my mouth to protest. To finally say enough was enough, and that's when everything changed. Just a moment, please. The voice came from the end of the table. Soft but commanding. Everyone fell silent. Grandma Helen, my adoptive mother's mother, was standing. At 78 years old, she still commanded attention. Silver hair perfectly styled, posture straight as a rod, eyes sharp as broken glass. Something in her expression made my chest tighten. Throughout my childhood, Grandma Helen had been different from the rest of them. While my parents and siblings treated me like an obligation, she'd been the one who showed up at my school plays, who remembered my birthday, who asked about my dreams. She was also the wealthiest person I'd ever known, a self-made billionaire who'd built a pharmaceutical empire from absolutely nothing. But lately, she'd been quieter, watching. I'd noticed her observing family gatherings with this intensity that made me wonder what she was thinking. "Mother, what is it?" Patricia asked, irritation creeping into her voice. "We were just about to leave. Sit down, all of you." Grandma Helen's voice carried an authority that made even my father straighten in his chair. "I have something to say, and you're going to listen." Victoria rolled her eyes but stayed seated. Marcus checked his phone under the table. My parents exchanged confused glances. Grandma Helen's gaze swept across each of them before landing on me. Something flickered in her eyes. Sadness, maybe, or disappointment in everyone else. "I've been watching this family for years," she began, her voice steady but cold. "Watching how you treat Emma, how you've always treated her." "Mother, really?" Patricia protested. "This isn't the time—" "Be quiet." The command was so sharp that my mother actually obeyed. "I'm 78 years old," Grandma Helen continued, "and I've spent the past few months thinking about my legacy, about where my money should go when I'm gone." The table went very still. My father's fork clinked against his plate as he set it down. Victoria's smug expression faltered. "We all know how this works," Grandma Helen said. "The bulk of my estate goes to Patricia, then distributed among the grandchildren. That's what the current will says." I watched Victoria's face light up with greed. She'd been counting on that inheritance for years, making investments based on money she didn't even have yet. But I've had my lawyer draw up a new will. Grandma Helen pulled an envelope from her purse. "Signed and notarized yesterday." The silence was suffocating. "You can't be serious," Marcus said. "You're changing your will because of what? A stupid joke? A joke?" Grandma Helen's laugh was bitter. "I've watched you all mock and belittle Emma for over 2 decades. I've watched you exclude her, humiliate her, treat her like she's less than human. And tonight, you made her pay for your excess while you laughed about it." "We were just having fun," Victoria protested, but her voice wavered. "Fun." Grandma Helen repeated the word like it tasted foul. "You think cruelty is fun? You think making someone feel worthless is entertainment?" My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Grandma Helen walked slowly around the table until she stood beside me. Her hand rested gently on my shoulder. "Emma is the only one in this family who's shown true character," she said. "She's worked for everything she has, built a business from nothing with no help from any of you. She's kind, talented, and resilient despite your best efforts to break her spirit." "Mother, you're being dramatic," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Grandma Helen's eyebrows rose. "Patricia, when was the last time you asked Emma about her life? Really asked and actually listened to the answer?" My mother's mouth opened and closed. "Marcus, have you ever congratulated your sister on her accomplishments? Ever acknowledged her success?" My brother stared at his plate. "Victoria, have you spent even one day treating Emma like family instead of a servant?" My sister's face flushed red. Grandma Helen looked at each of them, her disappointment evident. "You've all failed spectacularly. You took in a little girl who'd lost everything, and instead of giving her love and support, you've spent 22 years making her pay for kindness you never actually showed." The weight of her words settled over the table like a heavy blanket. Other diners had stopped pretending not to listen. "So here's what's going to happen," Grandma Helen said, her voice gaining strength. "My entire estate, every dollar, every property, every investment is going to Emma." The explosion was immediate. "What?" Victoria shrieked, jumping to her feet. "You can't do that. That's not fair." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "Grandmother, think about what you're saying." Patricia's voice cracked. "You're talking about billions of dollars. Emma isn't even really family." "Stop." Grandma Helen's command silenced them again. "Emma is more family than any of you have ever been. She's earned this, not through blood but through character, through being a better person than all of you combined." I sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. Billions of dollars. Grandma Helen's entire fortune. It was impossible, unreal, too enormous to comprehend. "You're being manipulated," David said desperately. "Emma must have done something. Emma has done nothing but survive your mistreatment." Grandma Helen cut him off. "And that ends tonight." She pulled out her phone and made a call. "Thomas, it's Helen. Yes, file the new will immediately. Make sure it's ironclad. And prepare the trust documents for Emma." My family's faces ranged from shock to fury to disbelief. "This isn't over," Victoria hissed at me. "We'll contest it. We'll fight you in court." "Try it," Grandma Helen said calmly. "I've made sure everything is completely legal. And I'm of sound mind, as a medical evaluation from this morning confirms." She'd planned this, every detail, and then she said the words that changed everything. "There's something else you all need to know. Something I discovered 2 years ago." She pulled another folder from her purse and slid it across the table. When Patricia and David adopted Emma, they received a substantial sum of money, $750,000 to be exact. The restaurant seemed to stop breathing. It was from a trust set up by Emma's birth parents before they died. Money meant specifically for her care, her education, her future. My hands went numb. "And Patricia and David spent every penny," Grandma Helen continued, her voice cold as ice. "On vacations, cars, Victoria's private school tuition, Marcus's college fund, everything except Emma." The world tilted sideways. They'd been paid to adopt me. $750,000. And I'd worn donated clothes, taken out crushing loans, worked 3 jobs while going to school. They'd stolen my future and given it to their biological children. "That's theft," Grandma Helen said. "And my lawyers have already filed a civil suit. With interest over 22 years, they owe Emma approximately $2.3 million. Victoria lunged across the table, her face contorted with rage. Marcus grabbed her arm, but his own anger was barely contained. Patricia sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. David looked like he'd aged a decade in seconds. "Why are you doing this?" Patricia's voice cracked. "Because I'm dying," Grandma Helen said softly. "The world stopped." "What?" The word barely escaped my throat. "Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. I have maybe 6 months, probably less." She said it so calmly, but I saw the pain beneath the composure. "I found out 3 months ago," Grandma Helen continued. "And I've spent that time getting my affairs in order, making sure my legacy goes to someone who deserves it." Tears blurred my vision. Grandma Helen was dying. The one person who'd ever truly loved me was leaving. "Oh, don't cry, Emma." She pulled me into a hug, and I breathed in her familiar perfume, lilac and vanilla. "This isn't sad. This is justice." Around us, the restaurant had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen noise had died down. Everyone was watching this family implode in real time. The next moments were chaos. Victoria screaming, Marcus threatening, Patricia sobbing, David pleading. But Grandma Helen stood firm, her arm around me, protecting me one last time. "I want to go home," I whispered. "Of course," she said gently. "Thomas is outside with the car. He'll take us both to my place. We have a lot to discuss." As we turned to leave, Marcus blocked our path. "This isn't fair. She's not even really one of us. Move." Grandma Helen's voice was ice. "Or I'll have security remove you." He stepped aside, but the hatred in his eyes made me flinch. We walked through the restaurant in silence, every eye following us. The cool Seattle air hit my face as we stepped outside, and I gulped it down, trying to steady myself. A sleek black car waited at the curb. Thomas, Grandma Helen's driver of 30 years, opened the door with a knowing smile. "Miss Emma, welcome." "Thomas knows everything," Grandma Helen said as we slid into the back seat. "He's been helping me plan this for weeks." The car pulled away from the restaurant, leaving my family, former family, standing on the sidewalk in shock. Through the rear window, I saw Victoria screaming something, her face twisted with rage. Marcus was on his phone, probably calling a lawyer. My parents stood together, looking lost and broken. I should have felt something. Guilt, maybe, or fear. But all I felt was numb exhaustion, mixed with a strange sense of freedom. "Are you really dying?" I asked, my voice small. "Yes." She took my hand, her skin paper-thin but her grip surprisingly strong. "But I'm not afraid. I've lived a full life, Emma. Built an empire, raised a family, made my mark. Now I get to ensure that everything I've worked for goes to someone worthy." "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted. "I don't know how to be rich. I don't know how to run your companies." "You'll learn," she said confidently. "You're smart, hardworking, and you have good instincts. And you'll have an excellent team to guide you. I've made sure of that." The city lights blurred past the window as we drove toward her estate. "What happens now?" "Now?" Grandma Helen squeezed my hand. "Now we prepare you for your new life, and we make absolutely certain that your family can never hurt you again." The next morning, I woke up in one of Grandma Helen's guest rooms, momentarily disoriented by silk sheets and a view of the lake through floor-to-ceiling windows. Then the memories crashed back. The restaurant, the bill, the announcement. Everything. My phone had been buzzing non-stop. 43 missed calls from Victoria, 27 from my mother, 16 from Marcus, dozens of texts ranging from pleading to threatening. I scrolled through them with strange detachment. "You're being selfish. Think about the family. Patricia, I'll destroy you in court. You won't see a penny. Victoria, we need to talk. This can still be fixed. David, Grandma's clearly not thinking straight. Help us get her evaluated." Marcus, I set the phone down and walked to the window. Grandma Helen's estate sprawled across 3 acres of prime real estate. Morning sun glinted off the water, sailboats already dotting the horizon. This was mine now, or would be soon. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Miss Emma, breakfast is ready, and Miss Helen would like to see you in the study." I found Grandma Helen sitting behind an enormous mahogany desk, looking surprisingly energetic despite yesterday's revelation about her health. Thomas stood nearby, and a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit sat across from her. "Emma, this is Walter Chen, my attorney," Grandma Helen said. "We need to go over some things." Walter stood, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "Miss Emma, it's a pleasure. Your grandmother has spoken very highly of you." I sat down, feeling like I was in a dream. Walter opened a leather portfolio and began explaining details. The companies, the investments, numbers that seemed impossible. $3 billion in liquid assets, $5 billion in property and investments, stakes in pharmaceutical companies, real estate developments, tech startups. "The immediate access accounts activate today," Walter explained. $5 million for your personal use while the trust is being finalized. Your grandmother wanted to ensure you had resources right away. $5 million. For immediate use. I felt dizzy. "There's more," Grandma Helen said, her eyes sharp. "Your family will try to contest this. They'll claim undue influence, diminished capacity, anything they can think of. We need to be prepared. What can they actually do?" I asked. Walter leaned forward. "Legally, not much. Miss Helen has documentation proving her sound mind, including evaluations from 3 separate doctors. The will is ironclad. However, they can make the process difficult, drag it out in court, create negative publicity. Let them try," Grandma Helen said firmly. "I've been documenting their treatment of Emma for years. Every cruel comment, every exclusion, every incident of financial mistreatment. If they want a court battle, I'll bury them with evidence." My phone buzzed again. "Victoria." I silenced it. "There's something else you need to know," Grandma Helen said. and something in her tone made me tense. About the money your parents received for adopting you. She slid the folder across to me again. Bank statements. Transfer records. $750,000, I whispered, looking at the numbers. And I wore donated clothes, took out loans, worked 3 jobs. They spent it all, Grandma Helen confirmed. On vacations, cars, Victoria's private school, Marcus's college fund. They spent your money on everyone but you. The betrayal cut deeper than anything else. It wasn't just cruelty. They'd profited from my loss. Taken money meant for my care and used it to spoil their biological children while treating me like a burden. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I needed to be sure, she said. Needed all the documentation perfect and legal. And because, she paused, looking older suddenly. Because I knew that once you learned the truth, there would be no going back. Your relationship with them, toxic as it was, would be over completely. She was right. Any tiny part of me that had hoped for reconciliation died in that moment. They hadn't just been cruel. They'd been criminals. 3 days later, the story hit the media. Billionaire disinherits family for adopted granddaughter. Screamed the headlines. Somehow, and I suspected Victoria was behind it, details of Grandma. Helen's will change had leaked to the press. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with reporters wanting statements. I'd moved into Grandma Helen's estate temporarily, unable to face my apartment where my family knew the address. Thomas had retrieved my things, and I was living in this strange bubble of luxury and chaos. The public reaction was divided. Some praised Grandma Helen for rewarding character over blood. Others called me a manipulative gold digger. The comment sections were brutal. She must have been manipulating the old woman for years. Gold digger alert. Good for Helen. Family isn't blood. It's how you treat people. That adopted girl is going to blow through billions in a year. Watch. I tried to ignore it, but the words burrowed under my skin. Stop reading those, Grandma Helen said, finding me hunched over my laptop. She looked frailer than she had days ago, the cancer clearly progressing. People will always have opinions. Let them talk. They're calling me terrible things. They called me terrible things when I built my first company, she replied, settling into the chair beside me. Said I was too aggressive, too masculine, too ambitious. A woman couldn't possibly succeed in pharmaceuticals. I proved them wrong. She took my hand, her grip weaker now. You'll prove them wrong too, Emma. Not by defending yourself, but by being exactly who you are, kind, hardworking, principled. That afternoon, Walter arrived with news. Patricia and David have officially filed to contest the will. They're claiming diminished capacity and undue influence. Let me see, Grandma Helen said. I read over her shoulder, my anger building with every word. They claimed I'd isolated Grandma Helen from her family, that I'd manipulated a sick elderly woman, that I'd taken advantage of her declining mental state. This is ridiculous, I said. I didn't even know about the cancer until that night. We have evidence proving otherwise, Walter assured me, including testimony from medical staff, friends, business associates. They're grasping at straws, but something in Walter's expression made me nervous. What aren't you telling me? He exchanged a glance with Grandma Helen. Victoria has hired a private investigator. They're digging into your background, looking for anything they can use against you. My stomach dropped. There's nothing to find. We know that, Grandma Helen said. But they'll try to create something, twist innocent situations, take things out of context. As if on cue, my phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Emma! So good to finally reach you. The voice was unfamiliar, syrupy sweet. I'm Jennifer from Seattle Scene Magazine. I'd love to chat about your relationship with Helen. No comment, I said, moving to hang up. Wait! I just have a few questions about your business. There are questions about where you got your startup capital. Some people are suggesting Helen funded it years ago, that you've been planning this for a long time. My blood ran cold. That's not true. I built my business with my own money. Can you prove that? Do you have documentation? I hung up, my hands shaking. They're trying to create a narrative, Walter said grimly. That you've been grooming Helen for years, that everything you've accomplished was really her money. But it wasn't. I had loan documents, business records, we know, Grandma Helen soothed. and we'll prove it. But Emma, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get worse before it gets better. She was right. By evening, social media was flooded with theories. Anonymous accounts, probably my family, were spreading rumors that I'd failed out of community college. I'd graduated with honors, that my business was failing. It was thriving. That I'd had multiple affairs with wealthy older men. I'd barely dated in years. The cruelest rumor was that I'd somehow caused my birth parents' death to access their trust fund. I was 5 years old when they died, but facts didn't matter to internet trolls. That night, Victoria showed up at the estate, somehow talking her way past the initial security checkpoint. I found her in the foyer, arguing with Thomas. "I need to see Emma," she was saying. "Please. It's important." "It's okay, Thomas," I said, though my heart was racing. "I'll talk to her." Victoria looked terrible. Unshaven face, wrinkled designer dress, dark circles under her eyes. Nothing like the polished woman I'd grown up with. "Emma, please," she said. "We need to fix this. The family is falling apart." "The family fell apart a long time ago," I said. "You're just noticing now because money's involved. That's not fair. I know we weren't always. I know we could have been better to you. But this? Cutting us out completely? That's too far." "Too far?" My voice rose despite my attempt to stay calm. "Victoria, you humiliated me at that restaurant. You've humiliated me my entire life. And you all spent $750,000 that was meant for me while I struggled for everything." Victoria's face went white. "I didn't know about that money. I swear, you didn't know because you never asked. None of you ever asked about me, about my life, about whether I was okay." The words poured out. Years of pain finally finding voice. "You want to fix the family? There's nothing to fix. It was broken from the start. Emma, please, get out." My voice was steady now, cold. "Get out of this house and don't come back." "You're making a mistake," Victoria said, but there was no conviction in it. "When Grandma's gone, you'll have no one." "I already had no one," I said. "At least now I'll have resources to build an actual life." Thomas escorted her out. Through the window, I watched my sister walk to her car, shoulders slumped. For a moment, just a moment, I felt something. Not quite guilt, but a sad acknowledgement of what could have been if they'd chosen differently. That afternoon, Walter called an emergency meeting. His expression was grave. "Victoria's legal team claims they've found something. They're alleging that you forged documents related to your business, specifically contracts with clients. They're trying to paint you as dishonest, someone capable of manipulating Helen." "That's insane," I said. "All my contracts are legitimate. We know that. But they're filing a motion to delay the will proceedings pending an investigation. It's a stall tactic, but it could work." Grandma Helen's hand slammed on the desk, startling us both. Despite her frailty, anger gave her strength. "Absolutely not. Walter, file an emergency motion to expedite. I want this settled before—" She didn't finish the sentence. "Before she died." "I'm holding a press conference tomorrow," Grandma Helen said, her eyes fierce despite the exhaustion evident in her face. "I'm going to tell the truth, all of it. About the stolen money, the mistreatment, everything. But I need you to be there with me, Emma." Terror gripped me. "I can't. I'll say something wrong. You'll be perfect," she said firmly. "Because you'll tell the truth. That's all you need to do." The press conference was scheduled for 2 o'clock at Grandma Helen's downtown office. When Thomas drove us there, the media presence was overwhelming. Cameras everywhere, reporters shouting questions, a crowd of onlookers documenting everything on their phones. The conference room was packed. Cameras rolling, lights bright, the air thick with anticipation. Grandma Helen sat beside me at a long table, Walter on her other side. She looked small but unbreakable. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice surprisingly strong. "I'm here to address the rumors and allegations surrounding my will and my granddaughter Emma." She laid it all out methodically. The documentation of mistreatment, the stolen trust fund money, years of emotional and financial manipulation, bank records, medical evaluations proving her sound mind, testimony from witnesses. It was devastating, irrefutable. "Some have suggested Emma manipulated me," Grandma Helen said, her gaze sweeping the room. "The truth is the opposite. My biological family manipulated her. They took a grieving 5-year-old child and used her as a punching bag for their own inadequacies. They stole from her, belittled her, and made her feel worthless. Despite all of that, Emma built a life, a successful business. She became kind, compassionate, hardworking. Everything they are not. Then she gestured to me. Emma would like to say a few words. My mouth went dry. Every eye in the room was on me. The judgment, the curiosity, the skepticism. I cleared my throat. I don't know what to say that my grandmother hasn't already said. My voice steadied as I continued. I never wanted this attention. I never wanted to be rich or famous or involved in legal battles. I just wanted a family that loved me. I looked directly at the cameras. I wanted parents who cared if I was okay. Siblings who celebrated my successes instead of mocking them. I wanted to belong somewhere. Tears threatened, but I pushed through. I know some of you think I'm a gold digger, that I manipulated a dying woman for money, but I didn't even know about the inheritance until that night at the restaurant. I didn't know my grandmother was sick. I didn't know about the stolen trust fund money. All I knew was that once again, my family was humiliating me and demanding I pay for the privilege. My voice cracked slightly. My grandmother is giving me her fortune because she believes in who I am. Not because I asked for it. And I'm going to honor that trust by being exactly who she sees. Someone who builds things, helps people, and refuses to be cruel just because it's easier. The questions came fast after that. Reporters shouting. Cameras flashing. But Walter fielded them expertly, and Grandma Helen sat beside me, her hand finding mine under the table. As we were wrapping up, the doors burst open. Victoria. Security moved to stop her. But she was already shouting, "This is all lies. She's brainwashed you all." Victoria's makeup was smeared. Her designer dress wrinkled. She looked completely unhinged. "I'm the real victim here. That adopted brat has stolen my inheritance." Cameras swiveled to her, capturing every second of her meltdown. "Miss Victoria," a reporter called out, "what about the allegations that your parents stole trust fund money meant for Emma?" "That money was ours!" Victoria screamed. "We earned it by raising her ungrateful." She caught herself, but too late. The cameras had caught everything. Her admission, her rage, her complete lack of remorse. "Get her out of here," Walter said to security. As Victoria was escorted out, still screaming threats, I watched the reporters frantically typing on their phones. The narrative had just shifted. Victoria had given them the villain they needed, and it wasn't me. Grandma Helen squeezed my hand. "Well," she said quietly, "I don't think we could have planned that better if we tried." Despite everything, I almost smiled. Victoria had destroyed herself, and she'd done it on camera for the world to see. The video of Victoria's meltdown went viral within hours. By evening, it had been viewed over 10 million times. News outlets played it on loop. Social media exploded with commentary. Did she really just admit they took money for raising an adopted kid? This family is toxic. Emma deserves everything. Victoria just destroyed her own case in under 60 seconds. Brilliant. The public opinion shifted overnight. What had been a divided conversation became a landslide of support for me and condemnation for my family. I watched it all from Grandma Helen's study. Still processing, Walter sat across from me, looking pleased. Their legal case just collapsed. Victoria's admission that they earned the trust fund money by raising you is essentially a confession. Combined with the documentation we already have, they have no leg to stand on. What happens now? Now their lawyers will try damage control, but it's too late. The court hearing is in 3 days. I'd be shocked if the judge doesn't rule in our favor immediately. He paused. There's also the criminal aspect. The district attorney's office has reached out. They're considering fraud charges against Patricia and David. Criminal charges. My parents could go to prison. They're still my parents, I said quietly. Or they were supposed to be. They were never your parents, Grandma Helen said firmly, entering the study. She moved slowly, Thomas supporting her arm. Parents protect their children. Love them, support them. What Patricia and David did was exploitation. Over the next 2 days, Victoria's behavior became increasingly erratic. She showed up at my old apartment building screaming at tenants. She posted long, rambling rants on social media, each one more unhinged than the last. She claimed I'd used witchcraft to manipulate Grandma Helen, that I was part of a conspiracy, that she was the real victim of elder abuse. Each post only made things worse for her. The public watched her self-destruct in real time, and any sympathy that might have existed evaporated completely. Marcus tried a different approach. He went on a local news program, presenting himself as the reasonable middle ground. "Look, I think there were mistakes made on both sides," he said earnestly to the camera. "Yes, maybe we weren't as welcoming to Emma as we should have been. But to cut the entire family out over childhood disagreements? That seems extreme." The interviewer wasn't buying it. "Mr. Marcus, are you aware that your parents received $750,000 intended for Emma's care, which they allegedly spent on your education and your sister's?" Marcus's composure cracked. That money was for the whole family. Emma benefited from it too. She wore hand-me-downs while your sister got designer clothes. She took out loans for community college while you attended a private university fully funded. How exactly did she benefit? Marcus ended the interview early. But the damage was done. My father tried yet another tactic, appealing to sympathy. He gave a tearful interview about how he'd loved me like a daughter, how this was breaking his heart, how families should forgive each other. "We made mistakes," David said, his voice breaking. "What parent hasn't? But to be cut off completely, to be accused of theft, it's destroying us. Patricia can barely get out of bed. Marcus's marriage is suffering. Victoria is having a breakdown. All because we weren't perfect." The interviewer showed no mercy. "Mr. Sullivan, you're describing what you did as not being perfect. But investigators have documented years of emotional mistreatment, financial exploitation, and systematic exclusion of Emma from family activities. This goes beyond imperfection. That's not abuse. That's just family dynamics. Every family has issues. Every family doesn't steal $750,000 from a poor child." My father walked out, but my mother's approach was the most calculated. Patricia hired a PR firm and gave a carefully crafted interview to a sympathetic journalist. She wore a simple dress, minimal makeup, positioned herself in soft lighting. She cried at all the right moments. "I loved Emma from the moment we brought her home," Patricia said, dabbing her eyes. "She was this beautiful, broken little girl who'd lost everything. I wanted to give her a family, a home, love." She paused for effect. "Yes, we were stricter with her than with our biological children. Maybe that was wrong, but we were trying to prepare her for a hard world. We knew she'd face challenges as an adopted child, and we wanted her to be strong." The journalist nodded sympathetically. "And that money was meant for her care, and that's what we used it for. Housing, food, utilities. Raising a child is expensive. Maybe we should have documented every expense. But we were a family, not a business." She looked directly into the camera. "Emma, if you're watching, please know I love you. I always have. Can we please just talk? Without lawyers, without the media. Just mother and daughter?" I watched the interview with Grandma Helen and Walter. When it ended, I felt sick. "She's good," Walter admitted. "This is the most sympathetic they've looked since this started." "She's a liar," I said flatly. "She never loved me. This is just another manipulation." "I know," Grandma Helen said, "but some people will believe her. The question is, do you care? Did I? A week ago, I might have cared desperately. I'd have wanted everyone to know the truth, to see Patricia for what she really was. But now? No," I said. "I don't care what strangers think. The people who matter know the truth." Grandma Helen smiled. "Good girl." The court hearing arrived on a gray Seattle morning. The courthouse was surrounded by media. Protesters holding signs both for and against me. Curiosity seekers hoping for a glimpse of the drama. Walter had arranged for us to enter through a private entrance, but I could still hear the noise outside. Grandma Helen looked so frail in her wheelchair. We'd finally convinced her to use one, but her spine was still straight, her eyes still fierce. I held her hand as we entered the courtroom. My family was already there. Patricia, David, Marcus, and Victoria sat at the defendant's table with their team of lawyers. Patricia had maintained the soft, sympathetic appearance from her interview. David looked tired and defeated. Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes, but Victoria stared at me with pure, undiluted hatred. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Morrison, entered, and everyone rose. "This is a hearing regarding the will of Helen Chen and the contest filed by Patricia Sullivan and family," Judge Morrison began. "I've reviewed the documentation submitted by both parties. Counsel, your opening statements." The family's lawyer went first. A slick man named Robert, who argued that Grandma Helen had been unduly influenced, that her illness had impaired her judgment. that the will should be set aside in favor of the previous version. Then Walter stood. He didn't argue or plead. He simply presented facts, bank records showing the stolen trust fund money, medical evaluations from 3 separate doctors confirming Grandma Helen's sound mind, testimony from business associates about her mental acuity, documentation of the mistreatment I'd suffered, photos, recordings, witness statements, and finally, Victoria's viral video confession. Your Honor, Walter concluded, this is not a case of undue influence. This is a case of a woman choosing to leave her estate to someone who deserves it, and a family angry that their victim has finally escaped their control. Patricia's lawyer tried to counter, but Judge Morrison cut him off. I've seen enough, she said. My heart began to race. The evidence is overwhelming, Judge Morrison continued. Miss Helen Chen was clearly of sound mind when she executed her new will. The documentation of mistreatment is extensive and credible, and the admission by Victoria Sullivan that the family earned money meant for Emma's care essentially confirms the allegations of financial exploitation. She paused, her gaze sweeping across my family. Furthermore, the behavior exhibited by the contesting parties during these proceedings, including threats, harassment, and public defamation, only reinforces that Miss Helen's decision was correct. A family that truly loved Emma would never have treated her this way, before or after the will change. Victoria stood up, unable to contain herself. This is ridiculous. You can't just sit down, Judge Morrison commanded, or I'll hold you in contempt. Victoria sat, but her fury was palpable. I'm ruling in favor of the will as executed, Judge Morrison declared. The contest is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm ordering Patricia and David Sullivan to pay restitution for the misappropriated trust funds, $750,000 plus interest over 22 years, totaling approximately $2.3 million. They have 90 days to pay in full. The courtroom erupted. Patricia collapsed in her chair, sobbing. David looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Marcus put his head in his hands. Victoria started screaming obscenities until bailiffs escorted her out. I sat frozen, unable to process that it was over. We'd won. Completely. Decisively. Irrevocably. Grandma Helen squeezed my hand. It's done, sweetheart. You're free. Media swarmed us as we left the courthouse, but Walter and Thomas created a barrier. I heard the questions being shouted, but I didn't answer. I just helped Grandma Helen into the car and let Thomas drive us away. Back at the estate, Grandma Helen was exhausted but satisfied. I can die happy now, she said. The words hit me like a physical blow. Don't say that, please. Oh, Emma. She cupped my face with her thin hands. I'm not afraid. I got to see justice done. I got to know my fortune will be used for good. That's more than most people get. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched Grandma Helen fade. She slipped in and out of consciousness. Sometimes lucid, sometimes lost in memories. I stayed by her side constantly, holding her hand, telling her about my plans for the foundation I wanted to start. Something to help adopted children who were being mistreated or exploited. That's perfect, she murmured during one of her clearer moments. Help others like you. Break the cycle. I will, I promised. I'll make you proud. You already have. Her smile was peaceful. You survived them, Emma. You stayed kind when they were cruel. You worked hard when they tried to break you. You're everything I hoped you'd be. She died on a Tuesday morning, with me holding her hand and the sun streaming through the window. Her last words were, "Thank you for being my real family." I stayed with her for a long time after, crying for the woman who'd saved me, who'd loved me, who'd given me a future, the only grandmother I'd ever really had. The funeral was private. Just me, Thomas, Walter, and a few of Grandma Helen's close friends. My family wasn't invited, though Patricia tried to crash it and was turned away by security. In the weeks that followed, the full transfer of assets was completed. I was now the sole heir to an $8 billion fortune. The number was still incomprehensible, but I was determined to honor Grandma Helen's legacy. The first thing I did was establish the Helen Chen Foundation for Adopted Children. not because it sounded good or made me look charitable, but because I knew firsthand how many kids were trapped in situations like mine. The foundation would provide legal support, counseling, emergency housing, and educational funding for adopted children suffering mistreatment or exploitation. The second thing I did was hire an excellent management team for Grandma Helen's companies. I wasn't ready to run billion-dollar corporations, but I could learn. I attended every meeting, asked questions, studied at night. Slowly, I began to understand the empire she'd built. My family's downfall was swift and brutal, unable to pay the $2.3 million in restitution. Patricia and David were forced to sell their house, their cars, everything of value. They moved into a small apartment in a rough neighborhood. Ironic, considering they'd always looked down on people they deemed beneath them. David faced fraud charges for the trust fund theft and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Patricia received 2 years. Marcus, who'd benefited from the stolen money through his education, was required to pay back his portion, approximately $400,000. His marriage collapsed under the financial strain. Last I heard, he was working 2 jobs to make the payments. But Victoria's fate was the most satisfying. Her viral meltdown had destroyed any credibility she had. Her husband divorced her, taking their house and most of their assets. She'd invested heavily in a restaurant venture that failed spectacularly, leaving her deep in debt. The private investigator she'd hired to dig up dirt on me was now suing her for unpaid fees. She'd tried to write a tell-all book, but publishers rejected it after fact-checkers found it full of lies. She'd attempted to start a YouTube channel, but the comments were so brutal, she deleted it within a week. She'd even tried to reconcile with me. Not out of genuine remorse, but desperate hope I'd give her money. I'd read her email once. "Emma, I know we had our differences, but we're still sisters. Family forgives family. I'm struggling right now, and I know you're doing well. Maybe we could meet for coffee, talk about the past, and build a future together?" I deleted it without responding. 6 months after Grandma Helen's death, I stood in the foundation's new headquarters. A beautiful building in downtown Seattle, dedicated to helping children like I'd been. The walls were covered with photos of kids we'd already helped. Stories of escape and new beginnings. Thomas stood beside me, having accepted a position as the foundation's operations director. "Miss Helen would be proud," he said. "I hope so," I replied. My phone buzzed. Another message from my family. They never stopped trying. This one was from Marcus. "Emma, Mom and Dad are struggling. Dad's in prison. Mom's barely surviving. I know you're angry, but they're still your parents. Can't you find it in your heart to help?" I typed my response carefully. They were never my parents. They were people who took money to raise me and instead used me as a punching bag for their inadequacies. "I owe them nothing, but I'll make you a deal. I'll donate the exact amount they stole from me, $750,000, to a fund helping adopted children escape abusive families. In their names. That's the only legacy they'll have." I hit send and blocked his number. A year later, I was featured in a business magazine, not as the adopted girl who inherited billions, but as a CEO running multiple successful companies and a growing foundation that had helped over 500 children. The article focused on my work, my vision, my accomplishments. There was a small mention of my family drama, but it was in the past now. The narrative had shifted. I wasn't the victim anymore. Wasn't the gold digger or the manipulator. I was simply Emma, a woman who'd survived, thrived, and chosen to help others do the same. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Victoria was working in telemarketing, barely making ends meet. That Patricia, released from prison, was living in a women's shelter. That David was still incarcerated, his health failing. That Marcus was bankrupt, his expensive education worthless without the connections and money that had always propped him up. Part of me, the part that remembered being a hurt little girl, felt a twinge of something, not quite satisfaction, not quite pity, just acknowledgement that actions have consequences. That cruelty eventually circles back. 2 years after Grandma Helen's death, I was invited to speak at a conference about adoption reform. I stood on that stage in front of hundreds of people, and told my story. Not for sympathy, not for validation, but because somewhere in that audience might be a child, like I was, trapped, hurting, believing. They deserve the cruelty. Your worth isn't determined by the people who failed to see it, I said. It's determined by who you choose to become, despite them. After the speech, a young woman approached me, maybe 19 or 20, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm adopted too. And my family, they treat me just like yours did." I thought I was crazy. I thought it was my fault. I took her hands. "It's not your fault. And you're not alone anymore." I gave her my card, connected her with the Foundation's resources. That was the moment I understood what Grandma Helen had given me. Not just money. Not just freedom, but the ability to be for others what she'd been for me. A lifeline, a believer, a protector. 3 years after that night at the restaurant, I received a letter from Patricia. I almost threw it away without opening it. But curiosity got the better of me. The handwriting was shaky. The paper cheap. "Emma, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing this because I'm dying. Cancer. And I want you to know that you were right about everything. We failed you. I failed you. I let my insecurities and prejudices poison my children. I let David's cruelty become our family's culture. And I stole from you, not just money, but love and safety and belonging. Things every child deserves. I can't undo what we did. But I hope, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, that you've found peace. That you've built a life full of people who see your worth. Because you always had worth, Emma. We were just too broken to recognize it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I read it twice, then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. She'd finally told the truth. Even if it came decades too late, I didn't respond. Didn't visit. Didn't send money, because some wounds don't heal with apologies. Some relationships can't be salvaged, and that's okay. I'd built a new family. Thomas, who treated me like the daughter he never had. Walter, who protected me like family. The team at the Foundation, who believed in the same mission I did, and the hundreds of children we'd helped, who sent letters and emails telling me I'd changed their lives. That was my family now, chosen, built, earned, not through blood, but through love, respect, and mutual care. 5 years after Grandma Helen's death, I stood at her grave on a quiet morning. I came here often, to talk to her, to tell her about the Foundation's growth, about the lives we'd changed. "We helped our 1,000th child last month," I said softly, running my fingers over her headstone. "A little girl named Sophie, 7 years old. Her adoptive parents were using her as unpaid labor. We got her out, found her a loving foster family. She's thriving now." The wind rustled through the trees. "You were right, Grandma. About everything. The money wasn't the gift. The gift was showing me that I deserved better, that I could demand better, that my worth wasn't determined by people too broken to see it." I placed fresh flowers on her grave, lilacs, her favorite. Victoria declared bankruptcy last year. Marcus is working at a call center. Patricia died 6 months ago. David's still in prison, but his health is failing. Their empire of cruelty collapsed and they have nothing left. I paused, and I don't feel victorious about it. I don't feel satisfied or vindicated. I just feel free. Free from the weight of their judgment. Free from the hope that they'd change. Free to be exactly who I am without apologizing for it. The sun broke through the clouds, warming my face. I built something beautiful from the ashes of that pain, Grandma. Not just for me, but for others like me. And that's the best revenge. Not their destruction, but my creation. I stood there for a while longer, feeling her presence in the quiet. Then I walked back to my car, where Thomas was waiting. "Ready, Miss Emma?" "Ready." We drove to the Foundation headquarters, where a new program launch was scheduled. This one would provide scholarships for adopted children to attend college. Full rides, no loans, no debt. The program was named the Dorothy Hayes Scholarship, a tribute to the woman who'd saved me. As I walked into the building, surrounded by my team, I realized something profound. My family, Patricia, David, Marcus, Victoria, they'd tried to make me small. Tried to convince me I was worthless, undeserving, less than. But Grandma Helen had seen the truth. Had seen my strength, my resilience, my capacity for kindness despite cruelty, and she'd given me the tools to prove it. Not just to the world, but to myself. I was worthy. I always had been. The cruelty I'd endured wasn't my failure. It was theirs, and now, every child who came through our foundation's doors would learn that same truth, that you're not defined by the people who failed to love. You're defined by how you rise after they tried to break. That's the real story, not the inheritance, not the court battle, not even the dramatic downfall of the people who hurt me. The real story is that a scared, hurt little girl grew up to be a woman who refused to let cruelty win, who chose kindness over revenge, who built something lasting from temporary pain, who broke the cycle instead of perpetuating it. And that's a legacy worth more than any fortune. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most will hurt you the deepest. But that says everything about them and nothing about your worth. True family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about who shows up, who sees you, who fights for you when the world turns away, and when you survive that kind of pain. You have a choice. You can become bitter, or you can become better. You can seek destruction, or you can build something beautiful. The best revenge isn't making them suffer. It's refusing to let their cruelty define you. It's thriving despite them. It's using your pain as fuel to help others escape theirs, because in the end, they didn't destroy me. They revealed who they really were, and that revelation set me free.